What if the life everyone dreams of is actually a prison? And what if the only way to find your true self is to disappear completely? Many believe you have to confront your past to heal, but I'm here to tell you that's not always the whole truth. Sometimes, running away is the first step toward finding exactly where you're meant to be. This is a story that turns everything you know about fame, justice, and destiny on its head. It's the unforgettable journey of a star in hiding who falls for a dock on the Runa. Powerful testament to how two dangerous secrets can erupt from just one small-town spark. On one side, you have Madeline Sanders, a woman who had the world in the palm of her hand. A beloved star, adored by millions, living a life most people can only imagine. But beneath the glamorous surface, she was suffocating, trapped in a gilded cage of her own making. So she commits the ultimate career suicide. She vanishes, trading the roar of the crowd for the whispers of the wind in a town no one knows, desperate to find the person she was before the world told her who to be. On the other side, there's Paul Murray, a brilliant doctor, a surgeon whose hands were instruments of hope, until his entire life was destroyed by a devastating act of betrayal. Framed and disgraced for a mistake that wasn't his, he is now a ghost, a man on the run from a past that relentlessly hunts him. His only mission is to stay invisible, to let the gifted healer inside him fade away so he can just survive. His most dangerous secret isn't what he did, but what was done to him. These two souls, both experts in the art of hiding, were never supposed to cross paths. Yet, in the heart of a forgotten small town, a simple chance encounter over something as mundane as spilled groceries ignites a spark so intense it threatens to burn down both of their carefully constructed worlds. This isn't just a love story, it's a collision of two pasts, a journey of overcoming, and a story of a redemption so profound and unexpected, it will restore your faith in destiny. Before we dive into every heartaching and emotional twist of this incredible story, we want to see how far this connection has reached. Please, take a second to write in the comments what beautiful city or town you're watching from, so we know how far our story has traveled. And if you believe that everyone deserves a second chance, do us a huge favor, hit that like button. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. And please, share this video with someone you think will be touched by it. You see, some places feel like they were built specifically for hiding. Havenwood was one of those towns, a sleepy hollow tucked away in the folds of a forgotten map, completely off the grid. It was the perfect stage for a disappearance, a place where a global star could simply vanish into the quiet rhythm of everyday life. This small town was a sanctuary, a place where you could bury secrets deep beneath the roots of ancient oak trees. It's funny how destiny works, isn't it? Just when you think you're safe, it sends in a brilliant doctor with his own ghosts. Madeline Sanders, or Maddie as she was known to the three people who actually spoke to her, breathed in the anonymous air like it was the sweetest perfume. For the first time in a decade, she wasn't a star, she was just a woman buying milk. But even in this newfound peace, an echo of loneliness remained. She was on the run from the flash of cameras and the roar of the crowd, but she hadn't figured out what she was running toward. Her story was a paradox, a life lived in the spotlight, now desperately seeking the shadows of a quiet existence. Then, there was Paul Murray. He didn't just arrive in Havenwood, he seeped into it, quiet and unassuming, like the morning fog. He set up a small practice on the edge of town, a place for scraped knees and winter colds, nothing more. But his eyes, man, they told a different story. They held the weight of a past he was clearly on the run from, the haunted look of a man who knew too much. This doctor wasn't just looking for peace, he was looking for a place where his own secrets could finally stop screaming. Their worlds collided in the most mundane way imaginable, a spilled bag of apples in the town's only grocery store. As Paul knelt to help her, his hand brushed hers, and a single undeniable spark ignited between them. it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet, intense hum of recognition, a silent acknowledgement that the person in front of him was carrying a weight as heavy as his own. It was a heart-aching moment that felt bigger than the both of them, a surprise connection. They barely exchanged a few words, a clumsy apology from her, a quiet reassurance from him. Yet, in that brief exchange, the carefully constructed walls around their secrets trembled. For Madeline, he was the first person in years who saw her and not the star. For Paul, she was a flicker of warmth in the cold exile had built for himself. This wasn't just a meeting, it was the beginning of a dangerous and emotional plot twist that neither of them could have anticipated. And so, they walked away from that simple encounter, two souls in hiding, now irrevocably linked by that fleeting spark. Neither Paul Murray nor Madeline Sanders knew that their search for solitude had just ended. In the heart of that small town, their separate journeys of overcoming were about to merge, forcing them to confront the very secrets they had sacrificed everything to protect. What happens when two people on the run find each other? Well, they either save each other or they destroy each other. Madeline Sanders really leaned into her new, simple life. She found a strange sort of joy in things she'd never experienced before, like the quiet satisfaction of tending to a small garden or the warmth of a morning coffee without a personal assistant. It was a life stripped of glamour, a life that was finally her own. Her past as a world-famous star felt like a movie she'd once watched, not a life she'd actually lived. This small-town existence was her greatest performance yet, and for the first time, she wasn't acting. She was just being. She told herself she was happy. And for the most part, she was. Hiding in plain sight was a strange kind of freedom, a release from the crushing weight of expectation. No one here wanted a piece of her, they just wanted to know if her tomato plants were doing well this year. It was a beautiful, quiet redemption from a life of noise. She was overcoming the hollowness of fame by filling her days with genuine, tangible things. This new chapter was supposed to be about solitude, about finding herself far from any complicated story. But you know how it is. The heart has a funny way of ignoring the plans you make. Despite her commitment to a life of quiet isolation, she couldn't shake the memory of the town's new doctor, Paul Murray. There was something about his guarded eyes and the gentle way he spoke that pulled at her. It wasn't just a fleeting attraction, it was a deep, resonant pull, a spark of curiosity that refused to be extinguished. He was a puzzle she found herself wanting to solve, a mystery in this otherwise predictable town. She'd see him from a distance, a solitary figure walking by the lake at dusk, and she'd feel that undeniable connection, that strange feeling of destiny. He was the only other person in Havenwood who seemed to be as committed to hiding as she was. It created an unspoken kinship between them, a silent understanding that they were both running from something. This shared sense of being on the run, of harboring deep secrets, only intensified her fascination with the quiet doctor and his haunted gaze. This pull towards Paul was an unexpected plot twist in her carefully written narrative of a simple life. He represented a complication, a potential crack in the fortress of anonymity she had so carefully built around herself. To get close to him would be to risk exposing her own secrets, and she knew that. But ignoring the magnetic force that drew her to him felt like ignoring a fundamental truth. It was an emotional and heart-aching dilemma that she wrestled with every single day. So while her days were filled with the simple joys of a small-town life, her thoughts were increasingly consumed by the enigmatic Dr. Paul Murray. She felt a genuine spark, a connection that went beyond the surface, and it scared her as much as it thrilled her. Madeline Sanders was beginning to realize that you can't control every aspect of your story. And sometimes the most beautiful chapters are the ones you never intended to write. What could possibly go wrong with getting to know him, right? Paul Murray's daily routine was a carefully constructed fortress designed to keep the world out. He'd wake up, go to his small clinic, treat minor ailments, and return home before the sun had fully set. His goal was simple: be invisible. He was a man on the run, not just from a place, but from a version of himself he desperately wanted to forget. The brilliant, life-saving doctor was buried deep, and in his place was a man who just wanted to be left alone with his ghosts. This small town was his last hope for silence. His past was a relentless shadow, a constant reminder of the secrets he was forced to keep. Every time he stitched a cut or prescribed an antibiotic, he felt the phantom weight of the life he'd lost, the career that had been stolen from him. Keeping his head down wasn't just a strategy, it was a necessity for survival. He couldn't afford to make connections or draw attention to himself. He was a man in hiding, and the stakes were impossibly high. His destiny, it seemed, was to live a half-life, always looking over his shoulder. Then there was Maddie. She was a surprise, a variable he hadn't accounted for in his equation of solitude. Her kindness wasn't flashy or demanding, it was simple and genuine. She'd leave a basket of vegetables from her garden on his porch, or offer a warm, unassuming smile when they crossed paths in town. She was a beacon of light in his carefully curated darkness, a woman who seemed too good to be true. He couldn't help but feel a spark of something he thought was long dead inside him. He tried to resist it, of course. Had learned the hard way. That trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. In his experience, people always wanted something. But Madeline, she didn't seem to want anything. Her kindness was unconditional, a heart-aching gesture in a world that had shown him only betrayal. It was disarming, and frankly, it terrified him. He was a doctor trained to diagnose problems, and this woman was an anomaly he couldn't figure out, an emotional puzzle that defied logic. He found himself thinking about her more than he was comfortable with. Her easy laugh, the way she seemed so at peace with her simple life fight, was a stark contrast to his own internal turmoil. This budding connection felt like the beginning of a dangerous love story, one that could unravel all the secrets he fought so hard to protect. Overcoming the instinct to push her away was a daily battle. He knew he should keep his distance, for her sake as much as his own. But her goodness was like a persistent, gentle rain, slowly eroding the stone walls had built around his heart. Paul Murray was a man haunted by the past, but he was beginning to be haunted by something new, the possibility of a future. The kindness of Madeline Sanders was a complication he hadn't expected, a glimmer of hope he wasn't sure he deserved. He was still trying to keep his head down, but it was getting harder and harder not to look up when she was around. Life in Havenwood moved at the pace of a slow-drifting cloud. Nothing ever really happened. That is, until the annual town fair, when a rickety old Ferris wheel decided to become the stage for a heart-stopping drama. A young boy, right at the very top, suffered a severe allergic reaction, his breathing becoming ragged and shallow. Panic rippled through the crowd below. The nearest hospital was over an hour away, and it was terrifyingly clear that time was a luxury they didn't have. It was a nightmare unfolding in a small town. Paul Murray was in the crowd, trying his best to remain anonymous, just another face in the sea of worried onlookers. But he heard the desperate cries for a doctor, and something inside him snapped. The instinct, the oath he had taken, roared back to life, drowning out the fear of being discovered. For a moment, he wasn't a man on the run anymore, he was a doctor, and there was a life that needed saving. He pushed through the crowd, his voice calm and authoritative, a stark contrast to the surrounding chaos. What happened next was nothing short of miraculous. With no proper equipment, Paul improvised with a stunning brilliance that left the townspeople speechless. He performed a life-saving procedure right there, high above the ground, with a steady hand and a focus that was almost inhuman. He wasn't just a small-town doctor for scraped knees anymore, he was a world-class surgeon in hiding. The entire town watched as he defied destiny, pulling the boy back from the brink of death. It was a heart-aching display of pure skill, The boy was safe. He was breathing. But as the applause and relieved sobs died down, something else took their place. Suspicion. Who was this quiet, unassuming doctor? Where did he get skills like that? Whispers started to spread like wildfire. People in Havenwood weren't used to heroes, and they certainly weren't used to miracles. Paul's act of redemption had saved a life, but it had also painted a giant target on his back. He had shattered his own camouflage. He tried to deflect the questions, mumbling something about old training, but the damage was done. The attention he had so desperately avoided was now shining on him like a spotlight. He could feel the weight of their stares, the curiosity that was quickly turning into mistrust. He wasn't just Dr. Paul anymore. He was an enigma, a man with secrets. His heroic act was a surprise that had completely backfired, threatening to unravel the very solitude he had come here to find. He had no choice but to reveal a part of himself, a spark of the brilliant doctor he used to be. But in doing so, he had invited the world to look closer, to dig deeper. As Paul walked away from the scene, the gratitude of the boy's parents ringing in his ears, he felt a cold dread creep into his heart. He had just set a ticking clock in motion, and he had no idea how to stop it. The question now was, who else was watching? Madeline Sanders had been there, lost in the crowd at the fair, and she had seen everything. She didn't just see a doctor performing a medical miracle, she saw the man behind the skill. She saw the raw compassion in Paul's eyes, the fierce determination to save a life, even at the risk of exposing himself. It was a moment of pure, unselfish heroism that cut through all the noise and speculation. For her, it wasn't a cause for suspicion, it was a confirmation of the good man she had sensed he was all along. As the town gossip machine kicked into high gear, with whispers and wild theories about the mysterious doctor, Madeline found herself becoming his unlikely champion. When the ladies at the general store speculated that he was on the run from the law, she calmly interjected, reminding them that he had just saved a child's life. She saw the goodness in Paul Murray, and she refused to let fear and ignorance tarnish it. She was defending more than just his character, she was defending the spark of hope he represented. Her defense of him did not go unnoticed. The townspeople were surprised by her fierce loyalty to the newcomer, but her words carried a certain weight. She wasn't just some random woman, she was Maddie, the kind soul who tended her garden and always had a friendly word for everyone. Her standing up for the town's mysterious doctor was an unexpected plot twist in the local drama, forcing some to reconsider their hasty judgments. It was a heart-aching display of faith in a man she barely knew. Paul heard about her defense. Of him, of course. In a small town, news travels fast. He was floored. He had expected judgment and suspicion, but he had not expected an ally. Madeline's unwavering belief in his character, even when she didn't know his secrets, was a profound act of kindness that chipped away at his hardened cynicism. It was a fragile, tentative step toward trust, a bond forged in the crucible of a crisis and solidified by her courage. This was more than a simple friendship, it felt like destiny. One evening, he found her sitting by the lake, and he quietly approached. He didn't have to say anything. The gratitude in his eyes was enough. They sat in a comfortable silence for a long time, watching the sun dip below the horizon. In that moment, they weren't a star in hiding or a doctor on the run. They were just two people who understood the weight of keeping secrets and the relief of finding someone who sees past them. The emotional connection between them deepened. This shared moment of quiet understanding was the true beginning of their love story. It wasn't built on grand declarations, but on a foundation of mutual respect and a shared sense of being outsiders. Madeline's defense of Paul had created a bridge between their two isolated worlds. A fragile bond of trust had been forged, but they both knew that trust is a delicate thing, easily broken by the secrets that still lurked just beneath the surface. What would happen if he discovered hers? Paul was starting to believe again. He was starting to believe in kindness, in trust, in the simple, unassuming woman who called herself Maddie. That fragile bond they were building felt like the first real thing he'd had in years. But destiny, it seems, has a cruel sense of humor and a flair for the dramatic plot twist. His hope was about to come crashing down in the most unexpected and heart-wrenching way possible. The universe was gearing up for a truly emotional surprise, and Paul was completely unprepared for the impact. It happened during a rare trip to a neighboring town for medical supplies. While waiting for a prescription to be filled, he idly picked up a glossy magazine from a dusty rack. And there she was. It wasn't Maddie, the gentle gardener with kind eyes. It was Madeline Sanders, the world-famous star, staring back at him from the cover, her smile polished and perfect. The headline screamed about her mysterious disappearance. From the public eye, his world tilted on its axis. The shock was a physical blow. Every memory of her, every kind word, every genuine smile, was instantly reframed in his mind as a lie. He felt like a fool. A deceitful actress. That's what she was. She wasn't a simple woman living a simple life, she was playing a role, and he had been her most captivated audience. All his fears and paranoia came rushing back with a vengeance. The woman who seemed too good to be true actually was. She wasn't just hiding, she was deceiving everyone in this small town. He threw the magazine down as if it had burned him, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and betrayal. How could he have been so blind? He, a man on the run, who prided himself on seeing through deception, had fallen for the oldest trick in the book. This wasn't a love story, it was a sham. The spark he felt, the connection he thought was real, it all felt like a carefully crafted illusion designed by a world-class performer. The secrets she was keeping were far more calculated than he could have imagined. The drive back to Havenwood was a blur of confusion and rage. He saw her face everywhere, not the kind, gentle face of Maddie, but the glamorous, artificial face of the star on the magazine cover. He felt the sting of betrayal deep in his soul. He had started to open up to her, to trust her, and it had all been based on a lie. His journey of overcoming his past had just hit a massive, insurmountable wall. He felt like he was right back where he started, alone and trusting no one. When he got back to town, he couldn't even look at her. The genuine kindness he had admired now seemed like a masterclass in manipulation. Paul Murray retreated back into the cold, cynical shell he had inhabited for so long. He had accidentally stumbled upon Madeline's biggest secret, and in his mind, it invalidated everything. He was a doctor, but he had completely misdiagnosed the one person who had started to heal him. Now he wondered what other lies she was hiding. Madeline felt the shift immediately. The warmth in Paul's gaze was gone, replaced by a cold, impenetrable wall. His friendly greetings became clipped, his presence distant. She had no idea what she had done, but it was clear that the fragile bond of trust they had so carefully built was now shattered into a million pieces. The sudden change was a cruel and emotional plot twist she couldn't comprehend. She tried to reach out, to ask what was wrong, but he was a ghost, always just out of reach. Feeling completely misunderstood and utterly heartbroken, Madeline retreated. She pulled back into herself, the joy she had found in her simple life dimming under the weight of his unexplained rejection. The small town that had once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a cage, amplifying her loneliness. Her journey of overcoming the isolation of fame seemed to have led her right back to a different kind of solitude. She was hiding again, not from the world, but from the pain of his dismissal. His coldness was a mystery she couldn't solve, and it hurt more than any tabloid headline ever had. She replayed every conversation, every shared moment, searching for a clue, a reason for his sudden change. Was it her secrets? Had he somehow found out? The not knowing was a special kind of torture. Her quiet love story had ended before it even had a chance to truly begin, and she was left with nothing but questions and a profound sense of loss. It was a heart-aching and painful surprise. Meanwhile, Paul was wrestling with his own demons. His anger was a shield, protecting a heart that was genuinely wounded. But even through the haze of his prejudice and feelings of betrayal, the memory of her unwavering kindness haunted him. He couldn't reconcile the image of the deceitful star with the woman who had defended him to the entire town. The woman who left vegetables on his porch with no expectation of anything in return. The two versions of Madeline Sanders were at war in his mind. He was a doctor, a man of logic and evidence, yet he had condemned her without a trial. He had let his own past, his own deep-seated fear of betrayal, color his judgment. Was it possible he was wrong? The memory of her genuine spark, the look in her eyes when she had defended him, it didn't feel like an act. It felt real. He was a man, on the run from injustice, yet he was perpetrating one of his own by judging her so harshly without hearing her side of the story. And so, they existed in a painful stalemate. Madeline, heartbroken and confused, retreated from the man who had inexplicably turned on her. And Paul, grappling with his own prejudice, was left with the ghost of her kindness, a persistent reminder that he might have just made the biggest mistake of his life. The silence between them was deafening, a chasm filled with unspoken words and misunderstood secrets. How could they possibly find their way back from this? The silence couldn't last forever. One night, unable to bear the tension any longer, Madeline saw a light on in Paul's clinic long after midnight. She took a deep breath, gathered every ounce of her courage, and knocked on the door. He opened it, looking tired and defeated, anger in his eyes replaced by a deep, hollow sadness. The surprise of seeing her there seemed to short-circuit his defenses. He didn't turn her away. He just stepped aside and let her in. They didn't start with accusations or explanations. They started with the truth. "I feel like I'm trapped," she said, her voice barely a whisper, not talking about her fame, but about the feeling of being constantly misunderstood. "Like I'm always on the run from a version of me that isn't real." Her words hung in the air, a raw and honest confession that had nothing to do with her life as a star and everything to do with her life as a human being. It was a deeply emotional and heart-aching admission. Her vulnerability was a key, unlocking something deep within Paul. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since had seen the magazine, and he saw not the actress, but the woman he had first been drawn to. "Me too," he confessed, the words tasting like rust from disuse. "Entrapped by a mistake that wasn't even mine. I'm in hiding, not just from people, but from the man I used to be." In that moment, he wasn't a doctor and she wasn't a star. They were just two prisoners of their own pasts. It was a powerful, transformative moment. The secrets they were keeping were still there, still huge and unspoken, but they no longer seemed like walls separating them. Instead, their shared feeling of being trapped became a bridge. They talked for hours, not about the specifics of their pasts, but about the weight of them, the loneliness of carrying such heavy burdens. It was a conversation born of desperation and a deep need to be understood, a raw and beautiful love story unfolding in the dead of night. This shared moment of vulnerability was the plot twist neither of them saw coming. It brought them closer than any happy moment ever could have. The spark between them reignited, brighter and stronger this time, forged not in blissful ignorance but in the fires of shared pain and mutual understanding. They were both still hiding, but for the first time, they weren't hiding alone. They had found a strange sort of sanctuary in each other's brokenness. It was a profound step toward redemption. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, the anger and misunderstanding had evaporated, replaced by a deep, quiet empathy. They hadn't solved their problems or revealed all their secrets, but they had found common ground. They were two people defined by their pasts, desperate for a future. This late-night confession had changed everything, binding them together in a way that felt like destiny. But they had no idea that their pasts were no longer just memories they were about to come knocking. Just as a fragile sense of hope began to bloom between Paul and Madeline, the past arrived in Havenwood. It didn't send a warning, it just showed up, driving a sleek black car that was completely out of place in the dusty small town. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, his eyes scanning the quiet streets with a predatory gaze. He wasn't a tourist. He was a hunter, and it was immediately clear that Paul Murray was his prey. The fragile peace they had found was about to be shattered. This shadowy figure was Dr. Alistair Finch, the jealous colleague who had framed Paul, the architect of his ruin. Seeing him was like seeing a ghost from a nightmare Paul could never escape. Finch's arrival was a terrifying surprise, a reminder that no matter how far you run, you can't escape the secrets that are on the run with you. Paul's blood ran cold. Finch wasn't here for a friendly visit. He was here to ensure that Paul's exile was permanent and that his secrets remained buried forever. Finch cornered Paul outside his clinic, his voice a venomous whisper. He made his threat clear: stay quiet, stay hidden, or he would not only expose Paul as a disgraced doctor, but would also fabricate new evidence to ensure he went to prison. He had tracked Paul down to tie up a loose end, to make sure the man he destroyed never had a chance at redemption. The confrontation was a chilling reminder of the evil Paul had been hiding from, putting him in an impossible emotional position. But the threat wasn't just to Paul anymore. Finch had seen him with Madeline, had noted the spark of connection between them. He made a veiled threat against her, suggesting it would be a shame if the nice local girl got caught in the crossfire. Suddenly, the stakes were higher than ever before. It wasn't just his own future on the line, it was Madeline's safety. His secret wasn't just a burden anymore, it was a loaded gun pointed directly at the woman he was starting to love. The arrival of this man sent a ripple of fear through Paul's entire being. He was trapped. If he stayed, he was putting Madeline in danger. If he ran again, he would lose the one person who had made him feel whole. This was the ultimate plot twist. In his story of overcoming his past, his enemy had found him, threatening to destroy the new life he was so tentatively building in this quiet small town. His love story was now a potential tragedy. Paul was forced back into a corner, the weight of his secret more suffocating than ever. He looked at Madeline, who was still unaware of the immediate danger, and he was consumed by a protective instinct so fierce it took his breath away. The shadowy figure from his past had turned his sanctuary into a battlefield, and Paul knew he had to do something. But what could he do when the truth was the one weapon he wasn't allowed to use? The clock was ticking. As if one looming threat wasn't enough, destiny decided to deal another cruel hand. While Paul was contending with the ghost of his past, a different kind of hunter was closing in on Madeline. A relentless reporter named Ben Carter, known for his ability to sniff out a story where no one else could, had received an anonymous tip. The tip was vague but tantalizing. The world's most famous missing star, Madeline Sanders, was hiding out in a forgettable small town called Havenwood. Carter arrived with a quiet determination, his camera hidden, his questions casual. He didn't come in like a storm, he was a slow, creeping fog, gathering information piece by piece. He started asking innocent questions around town about the quiet woman who kept to herself, the one they called Maddie. To the townspeople, he was just a curious tourist. But to Madeline, who recognized the predatory glint in his eyes from 1,000 press conferences, he was a walking nightmare. Her past was catching up to her. Her carefully constructed world of anonymity began to crumble at the edges. The reporter's presence was a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety. Every trip to the store, every walk by the lake, felt like she was being watched. The freedom she had cherished was evaporating, replaced by the familiar, suffocating feeling of being a specimen under a microscope. Her secret, the one that protected her sanity, was hanging by a thread. The emotional toll of being on the run was becoming unbearable. This was a different kind of danger than the one Paul faced, but it was just as potent. For Paul, exposure meant prison. For Madeline, it meant the end of her life, the end of her soul. It meant being dragged back into the circus she had escaped. Her sanctuary turned into a media-feeding frenzy. The thought of this small town being overrun by paparazzi, of her neighbors' lives being disrupted, filled her with a profound sense of guilt and dread. Her hiding was about to hurt the very people who had shown her kindness. The two threats, Finch and the reporter, were circling Havenwood like vultures. Paul and Madeline were trapped in a tightening net, each fighting a secret war the other didn't fully understand. The timing was a cosmic joke, a heart-aching tragedy waiting to happen. The spark that had ignited between them was now in danger of being extinguished by the storm that was gathering on the horizon. Their individual journeys of overcoming were about to collide in a very public and dangerous way. The pressure was mounting. The reporter was getting bolder, his questions more specific. He was one photograph, one confirmation away from breaking the biggest story of the year. Madeline knew she was running out of time. Her peaceful love story in a quiet small town was about to become a global headline. She and Paul were both cornered, their respective secrets ticking like bombs, and it was only a matter of time before one of them went off. The breaking point came on a tense, moonless night. Paul saw the reporter talking to Madeline from a distance, his questions becoming more pointed, and at the same time, he saw Finch's car parked ominously down the street. He was trapped between two fires, and he realized he couldn't protect Madeline without trusting her completely. The time for secrets was over. He found her moments later, her face pale with worry, and led her to the quiet solitude of his clinic. The air was thick with unspoken fears. "You're not the only one who's hiding," he began, his voice heavy with the weight of years of silence. He finally opened the floodgates and let the truth pour out. He told her everything. He spoke of his life before Havenwood, of being a rising star in the surgical world, a brilliant doctor with a promising future. He described the complex surgery, the one that went wrong not because of his mistake, but because of a piece of faulty equipment that his colleague, Alistair Finch, had knowingly failed to replace. He explained how Finch, eaten by jealousy, had seen his chance. He had altered the records, bribed a nurse, and created a perfect, airtight case that painted Paul as a reckless doctor whose negligence had cost a patient their life. Paul had lost his license, his reputation, his entire life, all in one fell swoop. The story was a heart-wrenching account of betrayal and injustice. He wasn't on the run from a mistake, he was on the run from a lie that had become his reality. Madeline listened, her heart breaking for him with every word. She saw the pain and torment he had carried alone for so long. His confession wasn't a sign of weakness, it was an act of incredible strength, and the ultimate gesture of trust in her. It was a raw, emotional plot twist that recontextualized everything she knew about him. He wasn't a man with a dark past, he was a good man to whom something terrible had been done. His story was one of survival, not guilt. This confession was a moment of profound redemption for Paul. For the first time, he had shared his heaviest secret with another person and had not been met with judgment, but with pure, unadulterated empathy. The relief was palpable. By telling her, he had taken the first step in overcoming the shame that had defined him for so long. It was a surprise to him how freeing the truth could be, even when it was so ugly. He had laid his broken life at her feet. Now the ball was in her court. He had trusted her with a secret that could send him to prison. He had made himself completely vulnerable, revealing the reason he was a doctor in hiding. This heart-aching confession had changed the dynamic of their love story forever. It was no longer about two individuals with separate secrets. It was about two people united against the ghosts of their past. The question was, what would she do with his truth? Madeline didn't hesitate for a second. Hearing Paul's story, witnessing his raw vulnerability, ignited a fierce protective fire within her. His secret wasn't a burden to her, it was a call to action. She looked at this brilliant doctor, this good man who had been so profoundly wronged, and she knew she couldn't stand by and do nothing. Her own problems with the reporter suddenly seemed secondary. Her destiny, she realized, was intertwined with his, and his fight was now her fight. Trusting him completely, she decided it was time to use the one thing she had been on the run from: her power. For years, being the star Madeline Sanders had been a curse. But right now, it could be a tool for justice. She made a decision, a risky and audacious one. She would risk her own secret to save him from his. It was a massive gamble, a plot twist that could expose them both, but it was a chance she was willing to take for the man she was falling in love with. Quietly, discreetly, she made a late-night call to a number she hadn't dialed in over a year. It was to her old manager, the only person from her past life she still trusted. Without revealing her location, she explained the situation in vague but urgent terms. She needed the best private investigator money could buy, someone discreet, relentless, and completely off the books. She was leveraging the connections of a superstar to help a doctor in hiding, a beautiful and ironic twist in their shared story. This act was Madeline's own form of redemption. For so long, her fame had felt hollow and selfish. Now she was using it for something that truly mattered: to fight for someone else's life and honor. It was a heartaching and empowering moment. A step towards overcoming the parts of her past she had resented. The surprise wasn't that she was willing to help him, but how right and natural it felt to put her own carefully guarded anonymity on the line for his sake. She didn't tell Paul what she was doing at first. She didn't want to give him false hope. This was a battle she would start for him in the shadows, using the very influence she had tried to escape. The spark of their connection had grown into a steady, burning flame of loyalty. Their love story was no longer just about emotional connection. It was about action, sacrifice, and an unwavering belief in each other against all odds. She was all in. And so, while the reporters snooped around their small town and Finch lurked in the shadows, a new player entered the game. An investigator, funded by a ghost, was now digging into the past of Dr. Alistair Finch, looking for the cracks in his perfect lie. Madeline had made her move, a brave and dangerous play in a high-stakes game. She was no longer just a woman in hiding, she was a quiet force, fighting for justice for the doctor who had stolen her heart. The moment of revelation came sooner than either of them expected. The investigator Madeline hired needed information. A direct line of communication, and the only secure way was a brief, encrypted video call. She took the call in her small cottage, believing she was alone. But Paul, worried about her, had come to check in and saw the screen through the window just for a second. He saw her talking to a man in a sharp suit, her tone authoritative, confident. Tone of a star, not a small-town gardener. He didn't hear the words, but he saw the name on a document the man held up: read the Sanders account, and it all clicked into place. The magazine cover, her fierce and sudden ability to command resources, her secrets. Maddie, the simple woman he had fallen for, was Madeline Sanders, one of the most famous people on the planet. The surprise hit him not with the anger he had felt before, but with a wave of stunned, breathtaking awe. He finally understood the full picture. Instead of feeling betrayed, he felt an overwhelming sense of humility. He realized the immense risk she was taking for him. A woman who had sacrificed everything for a life of anonymity was willing to dip her toes back into that dangerous world, all to clear the name of a disgraced doctor she barely knew. Her hiding was a shield to protect her soul, and she was lowering that shield to protect him. It was the most profound act of loyalty anyone had ever shown him. He confronted her gently after the call, not with accusations, but with a quiet, "I know." The look on her face was a mixture of fear and relief. And in that moment, All the glamour and fame melted away, and he saw only her. He saw that her incredible heart-aching kindness wasn't a role she was playing. It was the core of who she was. Her fame hadn't tainted her heart, if anything. It had made her more empathetic, more fierce, more determined to fight for what was right. This was the final emotional plot twist that solidified their love story. He wasn't in love with Maddie the gardener or Madeline the star. He was in love with the woman who was both. The woman who defended the underdog, who fought for justice, who loved with a ferocity that took his breath away. Her secret wasn't a deception, it was a part of her story, a part of the incredible journey of overcoming that had led her to him. The spark between them was now an inferno. He pulled her close, and for the first time, there were no more secrets between them. "It doesn't matter who you are," he whispered. "It only matters that you're here." He was no longer a doctor on the run, and she was no longer a star in hiding. They were just Paul and Madeline, two people who had found their destiny. In the most unlikely of places, united against the world. Her true identity wasn't a wall between them, it was the very thing that might just set them both free. The investigator Madeline hired was worth every penny. He moved with a swift and silent efficiency, digging into Alistair Finch's life with a forensic precision. He didn't just look for evidence, he looked for patterns, for whispers, for the one disgruntled employee who knew where the bodies were buried. And he found her a nurse who had been bullied into silence by Finch years ago, her conscience eating away at her ever since. The dam of secrets was about to break. Armed with a promise of protection and a chance at redemption, the nurse finally talked. She provided the investigator with a sworn affidavit and, more importantly, a copy of the original maintenance logs for the surgical equipment logs that Finch thought he had destroyed. The proof was definitive, undeniable. It showed a history of neglect on Finch's part and a clear documented paper trail that proved Paul Murray was not only innocent but had been the victim of a malicious, career-ending frame-up. Just as this heart-aching proof of Paul's innocence landed in Madeline's hands, the other shoe was about to drop. The reporter, Ben Carter, had finally gotten his confirmation. A grainy long-lens photo, a confirmed sighting from a delivery driver who recognized her from the movies, had his story. He was sitting in his motel room, typing out the explosive headline that would blow Madeline Sanders's hiding spot wide open and turn their quiet, small town into a global media circus. The timing was a cruel twist of fate. The two storylines were now on a collision course, a race against time. On one hand, Paul's chance at redemption, the key to unlocking his future, was finally within reach. On the other, Madeline's chance at a peaceful life was moments away from being annihilated. The emotional whiplash was intense. They had a victory in their grasp, but it was happening in the shadow of an impending disaster. Their love story was caught between justice and exposure. Madeline looked at the evidence that would free Paul, her heart swelling with pride and relief. Then she looked out the window and saw the reporter's car, and her stomach plummeted. It was a surprise that these two life-altering events would happen at the exact same moment. It felt like destiny was playing one final dramatic card, forcing them to confront everything they had been running from, all at once. There was no more hiding for either of them. The stage was set for a final confrontation. The proof of Paul's innocence was a weapon, but the reporter's story was a bomb. They had to choose their next move carefully. Would they use this newfound proof to quietly disappear again? Or would they stand their ground and face the storm that was about to break over their heads? Their journey of overcoming had reached its final, most difficult chapter. They had to face their pasts, not as individuals on the run, but together. With the irrefutable proof in hand, Paul's name was officially cleared. The news came via a quiet phone call, but its impact was seismic. The way he had carried for years, the shame and injustice that had defined his existence as a doctor on the run, simply evaporated. He was a free man. The sense of relief was so profound, so all-encompassing, that he felt lightheaded. His journey of overcoming had reached its destination. He had his life back. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated redemption. But as he stood there, the legal document that represented his freedom in his hand, he wasn't thinking about his old life or his career. He was looking at Madeline, who was anxiously watching the reporter get ready to make his move. At that moment, nothing else mattered. Her fame, her star power, the impending media storm, it was all just noise. All he could see was the woman who had trusted him, fought for him, and risked everything for him when she had nothing to gain. He walked over to her and gently took her hand, his touch steady and sure. The fear in her eyes was palpable, the dread of being exposed to the world again. "I don't care about any of that," he said, his voice filled with an emotional depth that resonated in her very soul. "They can say what they want. You saw the truth in me when I couldn't even see it in myself." He was no longer the man hiding his secrets. He was a man ready to stand by the woman who had become his entire world. This was the ultimate validation of their love story. It had been forged in secrets and suspicion, but was now solidified in truth and unwavering loyalty. He didn't see a superstar, he saw his partner, his champion. The plot twist wasn't that he was free, it was that his freedom meant nothing without her. His destiny wasn't to reclaim his old life as a brilliant doctor, it was to build a new one with her right here in this small town that had brought them together. The impending exposure of Madeline Sanders, the international star, no longer felt like a disaster. It just felt like the next chapter. Paul's support was a shield, his love an anchor in the storm. The spark that had started over a bag of spilled apples had grown into a bonfire of devotion, strong enough to withstand any headline. It was a heart-aching realization that true love isn't about hiding from the world, but about finding the one person who makes you brave enough to face it. So as the reporter made his final preparations to break the story, Paul and Madeline stood together, united. They were no longer running. He was a free man, not because his name was cleared, but because he was no longer a prisoner of his past. And he would stand with the woman who had given him that freedom, regardless of the consequences. They would face what was coming, not as a star in hiding and a doctor on the run, but as a team. The storm broke, just as they knew it would. The reporter's story exploded, and overnight, Havenwood was transformed. News vans clogged the single main street, and cameras were aimed at every corner of their once secret small town. Madeline Sanders had been found. But instead of hiding, instead of running, she did the one thing no one expected. She walked out of her cottage, holding Paul Murray's hand, and faced the media circus hidden. This was not a retreat, it was a declaration. In a calm, steady voice that carried over the clicking of cameras, Madeline didn't just confirm her identity. She rewrote her own narrative. She spoke of her journey of overcoming the crushing weight of fame and finding a genuine life. And then, she turned the spotlight away from herself and onto the brilliant doctor standing beside her. She told the world the true story of Paul's innocence, his redemption, and the injustice he had suffered. She used her platform not for herself, but for him. At the same time, the legal case against Alistair Finch became public news, a shocking plot twist that added another layer to the unfolding drama. Paul, no longer a man on the run but a symbol of integrity, stood by her side, a quiet pillar of strength. He didn't need to speak. His presence said everything. He wasn't leaning on her fame, he was supporting the woman he loved. It was a heart-aching display of unity, two people facing down their old lives, together. They were offered everything. Movie deals for their incredible love story, prestigious hospital positions for the now vindicated doctor, a triumphant return to the spotlight for the rediscovered star. It was a ticket back to the lives they had been running from. But in a final beautiful surprise, they refused it all. They announced their intention to stay right where they were, in Havenwood, the small town that had given them a sanctuary and had become their home. Their choice was a powerful statement. They were choosing a future together over individual fame or flight. They had found their destiny not in the roar of the crowd or the sterile halls of a hospital, but in the quiet authenticity of their connection. Their love story was more valuable than any career or public image. The spark they found in that grocery store had led them through secrets and danger to a place of profound truth and peace. And so, the media eventually left, the noise faded, and heaven would return to its sleepy rhythm. But it was different now. It was the home of a famous star who chose to be a neighbor and a brilliant doctor who chose to heal his community. In the end, Madeline and Paul had faced down all their secrets and discovered that the only one worth keeping, the only one that truly mattered, was the quiet, powerful secret of their love for each other. And so, the story of the star in hiding and the doctor on the run comes to its beautiful, quiet close. It started with two people, Madeline Sanders and Paul Murray, who thought their only option was to disappear from the world. They were both running from a past that defined them, seeking a sanctuary where their secrets could finally be safe. What they couldn't have known is that in running away, they were actually running directly toward each other, toward a shared destiny in a small town that would heal them both. Their journey was an incredible testament to the power of seeing beyond the surface. We watched them navigate mistrust, fear, and the very real dangers their old lives brought to their doorstep. But through every plot twist and emotional turn, from that first undeniable spark to their final united stand, they showed us that true love isn't about finding a perfect person. It's about finding the person who sees the truth of who you are, even when you're in hiding, and chooses to fight for you without a moment's hesitation. In the end, they chose their future together over the allure of fame or the satisfaction of revenge. They proved that home isn't a place you find on a map, but a feeling you find in another person's heart. Their love story was their ultimate redemption, a quiet victory that was more meaningful than any public accolade. It's a truly heartaching reminder that sometimes the greatest journeys of overcoming lead us to the simplest, most profound truths. But now we want to hear from you. What part of their story impacted you the most? Was it the heart-stopping moment at the town fair, or the vulnerable late-night confession that changed everything? Share your favorite moment in the comments below. We'd also love to know, did you expect this ending, or did you have a different finale in mind for them? We genuinely enjoy reading your thoughts and perspectives on the stories we share. If their emotional journey of love and redemption resonated with you, please show your support by giving this video a like. It truly helps us reach more people who need to hear stories of hope. And of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. You can check out our library of older videos while you wait, and trust me, you won't want to miss the powerful new stories we have coming your way. Thank you for being a part of this one.